Thanks, Charles, for letting me use your gardening supplies. I'll make sure I put it back in the garage. Man, tending to that lawn is a lot of work.
Tell you the truth, Jim, I'm more concerned about keeping this house.
What's going on?
Well, you know, Sarah lost her job 2 months ago, right?
Yeah.
Since we lost that income, the bills have been piling up, and we're so far behind. I don't want to lose the house because of back taxes. I don't know what to do.
I understand. The same thing happened to my sister and her husband when he lost his job. Do you know that the Wayne County Treasurer has plans and programs to help people stay in their homes?
No, I didn't. Tell me about it.
Yeah, go to www.treasure.waynecounty.com and see if you qualify.
What's that site again?
www.treasure.waynecounty.com.
Got it.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. My name is Saeed Khan, and oh my goodness, what a week it has been. We have got a lot to talk about, so let's get right to it. But first, let's go ahead and see who's joining us today. We have President of BME Consulting and former Director of Wayne County Public Services Department, Beverly Watts. How you doing, Beverly?
Pretty good. Good morning.
We've got community and labor activist and music maven, Barb Ingalls. We've got
this is everywhere.
Well, this is everywhere, yes. We could talk about that requiem in a sec. We've got veteran journalist Nancy Derringer. And, you know, they say in law school on your first day, look to your right, look to your left. Two of you aren't going to make it. We're down to only one of our troika. Steve Fishman is here. We won't talk about what happened to the other two. And of course, we're joined by co-founder of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel. So on the subject of the law, we had, of course, a very big verdict here this week. And that, of course, was of Jennifer Crumbley, mother of convicted murderer, mass murderer, Ethan Crumbley, convicted on the charge of involuntary manslaughter. The jury came back in, I think, 36 hours or less, and issued its verdict. So I got to go around the room. How many of you were surprised? How many of you expected? Steve.
I had said on the show, and I think I'd said it to any number, I kind of thought it'd be a hung jury. But when she testified, I think that hurt them a lot. And the other couple of things that stand out about that case, it really shows you what happens when there's media everywhere. One of my friends who's a lawyer had a pretrial during those couple of days where the jury was deliberating. He said literally coming into the parking lot, it was like if you were going to the Super Bowl. I mean, there were tents and there were buses and all kinds of stuff out there. It's just a lot of pressure on regular people. The other thing I had to say, Bill Seikaly was, I think, correct. A couple of weeks ago, I mentioned, or it might have been whenever they started the trial, I thought it was weird that 8 or 9 people who were gun owners were on the jury. I thought that would have hurt the prosecutor. Bill said at the time, and I think he's 100% accurate, that it would actually hurt the defense because they would all say, we would never do anything like that. We understand about gun safety, and therefore, she's guilty. The only other thing I would say, and I don't like talking about other people's cases, and I really don't like hearing people criticize lawyers one way or the other. The only chance, it seems to me, and I think the husband's lawyer ought to think about this himself or herself, the 2 witnesses that worked in the school that were professionals, right? That one was the dean of students, and they had vast experience with this kind of stuff. And I think if I were trying the case now, even then, I think I would have emphasized them and gotten through all of their backgrounds. And they had the chance to see the kid, and they were sitting right there with them, and they brought in the backpack and blah, 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 and then turn to the jury and not put her on the stand and then say, look, here's experts. And they let the guy go back to class. They let the backpack stay. And now you're asking her to be, they're not even charged with anything. You're asking her to be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt, and she's just a mother, not an expert. I don't know that it made any difference, but that's what I saw there. And I should say one other thing. Mark Chetka was on television. My wife pointed it out. He was a former chief of criminal in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he gave a really interesting answer. He said that he believes that this conviction will inspire prosecutors all around the country to start to bring these kinds of charges, because everybody's so sick and tired of this kind of behavior. And we all know they can't do anything about guns because Americans love guns. So maybe they're going to start doing that, get some of these parents to start paying attention.
Well, you're lavishing all that praise on Bill. Was a perfect segue to introduce Attorney Bill Seikaly to the show as well. So, Bill,
I apologize for being late. A judge kept me on the phone, and you don't argue with judges unless you absolutely have to. Steve, I agree with everything you said. I do think that they should have gone after the school thing. Here's the problem with the school people. I am convinced that they were told by their lawyers, you better say that you didn't perceive him as a threat to others, or you're going to pay out the nose. And so they kind of made up, I just thought it was a suicidal issue and not that he was a threat to others. I don't think a jury's going to buy the fact that these school people didn't think that he was a threat. You cannot look, and I've held these documents in my hand, you cannot look at these documents and not believe that this young man presented a threat to himself and others. You just can't. And I don't think any jury would. I happen to completely agree with Steve. I believe in the jury system. And they're not exactly human lie detectors, but they're pretty damn good at sniffing out bullshit. And I think there's an argument to be made that maybe they should have charged some of these school people too.
Well, there was that moment where the jury foreperson was interviewed briefly after the case. I'm so glad they chose a goth to be the jury foreperson.
I mean, seriously.
But I thought it was quite telling when she said that one thing that the jury really focused on was the fact that the mom was the last person before Ethan to have custody of the gun. That seemed to go a long way with them.
Right.
Beverly.
Yes, I agree. I think Steve took the words right out of my mouth. I really went into this and just hearing and being able to look at some of the trial, I thought there was going to be at least one person that she would be found not guilty because, yes, I think she was neglectful. But as a parent, especially when the administrators got up there and they were like, they didn't deem him to be a threat. They didn't even look at the backpack. I mean, they held it up. Oh, it's a little heavy, and let him go back to class. I hate to say this, but I think if the same circumstances were in the school in Detroit, you'd have a different outcome. I don't think they would allow that student to go back to the class. I don't think they would not have looked in that backpack. So I agree. I thought, but then when she got on the stand, I pivoted a bit because especially when they asked her, if you could change anything, would you? And when she said she wouldn't, I said, yeah, she's gone.
Yep.
Yeah, Steve, do you think your clients would have testified that way?
We've talked about this before. Other than police officers, I could count on my two hands in hundreds of jury trials, me ever putting the defendant on the stand. I've told you guys before, Bill knows this, that once you do that, you change the whole focus of the trial. You know, if you've been doing well, cross-examining the witnesses that the government presents, and everything's looking pretty good, and then all of a sudden you put your person on the stand, and if that person screws up, and it's easy to screw up because most of them have never testified before, and you got good prosecutors who know how to ask questions. So I would say no. I think particularly for her to have said that, Beverly, you're absolutely right. That answer was so completely crazy to me that the rest of her testimony kind of meant nothing. Then you wouldn't do anything different. Seriously, are you kidding?
Right.
Didn't she also testify that she was a bit of a helicopter mom? How you say, I was kind of a helicopter mom, and on one hand, and at the same time say I wouldn't have done anything differently.
Bill, I mean, just to clarify, I think she said that she was a helicopter mom to her horse. So,
something with the horses.
Nancy.
I just wanted to add, I've seen, this is everybody that I've talked to about this case says this could never have happened to me because I'm a better parent than her, that she was a terrible parent. But I did listen to a podcast about this, and somebody brought up, and I can't remember which one it was, either Mrs. Harris or Mrs. Klebold, the mother of the one of the two shooters in Columbine, which kind of started this whole ghastly trend, who has devoted her life to, trying to make any kind of amends that she can for what her own child did, and, trying to kind of talk about this issue and what we need to do. And she is adamant that she did not see any of this coming. Now, keep in mind, these kids planned it for months. They were building pipe bombs. I mean, it's easy to say I would have known, but at some point, your kids have their own lives, and the more you helicopter them, the more resentful they get. And so it's really, it's one of those, just thank God that it wasn't me. I mean, just because
has no one had kids plan a surprise party or surprise gifts for a parent or for somebody else? I mean, it is like omerta.
It is.
It is a complete cone of silence by which they operate. So, I mean, what got me was when the jury came back in, her attorney was visibly shaking. I think that she realized that with the brevity of the deliberation, that this did not bode well. I mean, I have to admit, it caught me by surprise.
I'd be curious, particularly the lawyers. What kind of sentence do you see happening here?
I asked. I don't go to state court anymore, but I think her guidelines are somewhere in the vicinity of 5, like, I don't know, 52 months to 70 months. I would think she's been in county jail for 2 years, which is the equivalent of being in a regular institution 3 years, maybe 4 years. And I think 5 to 15 is what I kind of suspect is going to happen. Yeah. Something like that. I mean, 10 is the max for those who are watching who don't know. 2/3 is the most anybody can get in state court. So the most she could get is 10 to 15, and I just can't see that happening in this case. From what I understand, I don't know the judge from Adams House Cat, but I understand that she's a fair judge and tries to do the right thing. And that's what I would see is 5 to 15.
What is the credit that they get for time served in a county jail? Do they get 1 for 1? What is the credit that they get?
1 for 1. But what I did all the time, and not so much in the older days, but now the way county jails are, I always tried to get the judges to give them credit for 2 for 1. And don't forget, this is unusual because this case took so long, and there's a lot of people that have been in federal jails, which is still county jails, for 2-3 years because of the pandemic. And I think a lot of the lawyers, we raise it all the time. If you're in an institution, particularly a federal institution, you have exercise. There's guys playing basketball. You can study stuff. County jail, you just sit on your ass. You can tell. Look at her. She gained 60 pounds from eating that shit.
Yeah.
I still have yet to be in a prison that I would want to go to. However, there are basketball courts. Some even with tennis courts, but I still wouldn't want to be there.
You can play a lot of good basketball in Morgan's. In fact, I will tell you a real quick story. We used to go play softball against the inmates around here. And we were at Mound Correctional, and we were playing softball. And a couple of the fellows that knew me from guy comes like, "Hey, Fish, come on over and play 3-on-3 with us." So I went over there in my baseball shoes and played 3-on-3 with the guys. So yeah, you can play a little basketball inside.
But you know what?
Didn't you munch up the court, and didn't you get like arrested for vandalism doing that?
I'm going to answer Alan's question. I think it's going to be hard for this judge to not give her very close to the maximum. I do think that she'll give her more time. I think she'll actually spend probably another 5 years in prison.
Wow. 7 to 15. That's a significant sentence, I tell you.
That's a lot.
So high profile. That's a lot.
Yep.
So you said before, maybe it was Steve who said earlier that this is going to inspire prosecutors around the country, and maybe it'll do something about it. Do you think this is going to spread beyond fatal incidents like mass shootings?
Here's what I think, and Bill is the perfect person to benefit. I've said from the beginning, with respect to guns and with respect to this kind of stuff, all you got to do is let people like Bill and Ben Johnson and them sue them, and stuff will start changing. That's what happened with cigarettes. And so if you're not going to do that, which it seems like none of the people in Congress have the balls to do it, then at least these prosecutors, this was Mark Chutkow talking, not me, and he's a career prosecutor now. He's at Dyke since he left the office. But what he said made perfect sense to me. It'll be an opportunity to get these parents to start thinking, wait a minute, if my kid does something like this, I'm going to prison. I mean, that's a big difference. You know what I mean? So, yeah.
And to address, Nancy, your earlier concern, because I think it's a valid one, it's not that you can hold any parent responsible.
Right.
I mean, these were extraordinary.
Yes.
I totally get it.
Extraordinary facts. Now, so for criminal prosecution, I think you're going to have extraordinary facts where the parents were given information that, most parents who have kids who have done these horrific things don't have. To go back to Steve's point, however, if the law was such that a person who did not properly lock their gun was responsible for damage done by that gun in anybody else's hand, which, by the way, is the law. It is the law with automobiles, but not with guns. And that makes sense to anybody else? So I lend my car to Allan. Allan gets into an accident and kills Barb. There's a lawsuit against me because I own the car and gave it to Allan and he was negligent with it. But we don't have that rule as to guns. Wouldn't it make more sense with guns than it does with cars?
Yeah.
Hey, Bill, next time I'm going to take an Uber.
Yeah.
I'm not kidding a minute.
I'm glad he didn't say kill Bev.
I said if I lent my car to Allan.
Bill, that's why we're all going to send you the pink slips on our car so that you've got them.
Well,
the
NRA, which has been instrumental in keeping these liability laws off of the books and stopping them in bill form, is on the ropes right now. I mean, Wayne LaPierre had resigned in disgrace. It's turned out to be a thoroughly corrupt organization, not just morally and ethically, but I mean all the way down. So it's like this is the time for legislators to strike. I mean, hit them. They're down. Let's kick them a few times, and maybe we can get some decent laws.
Well, Nancy, maybe there'll be an insurrection. And speaking of, it looks like the DC Court of Appeals has denied President Trump's bid for presidential immunity. Ex-President Trump, sorry,
Citizen Trump,
Citizen Trump, as they call it, bid for immunity from the January 6th insurrection case. It was a unanimous 3-judge panel that ruled so. We're not sure if he's going to appeal for an en banc hearing of all 29 judges on the DC Court of Appeals, or straight up to the Supremes. But I believe, Allan, we got a video.
Number one, it wasn't an insurrection. And number two, I didn't cause the insurrection.
The one thing I'll say is they kept saying about what I said right after the insurrection. Because I think it was an insurrection caused by Nancy Pelosi.
That's right. Nancy Pelosi cooked up a secret plot to have a bunch of MAGA morons break into her office and poop into her desk. That's how she does things.
Poop in her desk.
I mean, a unanimous three-judge panel is certainly decisive. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's a decision that couldn't be reversed or remanded by a higher court. But given the seriousness of this regarding immunity, and given what the Court of Appeals decision said, and even despite the fact that SCOTUS has 3 justices, what do you think the likelihood is that they will say that he's got immunity?
I should let the lawyers, but I want to speak about this. I think first of all, yesterday's argument over the Colorado thing, we're going to probably see a unanimous. The worst we'll see is a 7-2 with Alito and Judge Thomas. And in this case, the Court of Appeals decision, and I'll defer to the lawyers after this, but the Court of Appeals decision is so solid and so tight. I think Judge Roberts, if he can, is going to avoid the embarrassment of having Alito and Thomas vote the opposite way. I think they'll try to reject and say we're not even going to hear this case. So,
That's an interesting thought.
Well, they need 4 to forget Alito and Thomas. They need 4 people, 4 justices to say we're going to take the case.
Right.
I agree with you. I'm sure Bill does too. That opinion, which I read because I wanted to really see, the opinion is so tight, and the language they use in that opinion is very strong language, especially when they start talking about who are we kidding? We're going to let somebody commit murder and get away with it because they were the president at the time. It's ridiculous. I don't believe they're going to accept leave, which means, and there's no way it's going to get an en banc hearing. There's no way, because Bill and I both know in order to get en banc, you have to have conflicting opinions. You definitely have to have a dissent where somebody's making a really strong argument in favor of whatever their position is. We don't have that here. And I do not believe the Supreme Court is going to grant leave. And I think they're going to be trying that case. When did she say it? In June, I think, or
I think Steve raises the right issue. I hate to predict what they're going to do. The opinion said, I also read it. Steve's right. It's a great opinion, but nobody should have had to have written it. I mean, it's laced with this common sense argument that you can't grant former presidents total immunity. It's an absurd position. And it was, by the way, something that Trump's own attorneys during the impeachment said wasn't true. But look, what would help Trump is any delay. Every day of delay that Trump gets, it pushes back the trial. So I think he's likely to argue for an en banc, though the Court of Appeals said we are lifting the mandate. The mandate is the thing that stops enforcement. We're lifting the mandate as of Monday, so you have until Monday to go to the Supreme Court to try and keep this stayed. I think they would, under normal circumstances, ask for an en banc because that would delay things another 30 to 60 days. I think they're going to try and go to the United States Supreme Court again because that would delay it if they got the hearing. But not that the Supreme Court is political.
Understatement.
I would not be surprised if the deal was already cut. That you'll get a unanimous opinion overturning Colorado because we can't have it going state by state when it's the only national office. And 2, we won't hear the appeal on the immunity issue. I wouldn't be surprised if that deal was already cut by Roberts, because Roberts has got to be terribly concerned about what the Supreme Court is going to look like.
Well, if the Supreme Court's, if the justices aren't worried about the fact that Trump, if he has immunity, could even have a justice killed, Roberts needs to screen the Pelican brief right before they grant cert, because that'll set him straight. Well, speaking of charges, it looks like President Biden will not face charges in the classified documents issue. The special counsel that had been appointed released his 300 plus page report. Didn't quite leave Biden off the hook, though. It did say that he willfully was retaining classified documents. But there was a bigger issue when it came to the Biden classified documents case. We got a video to set that up.
Is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad I let you speak. That's
your memory has gotten worse, Mr. President?
My memory has not gotten. My memory is fine. My memory. Take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? Initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate.
Hey,
Ouch.
When I was watching that last night, I said, I hope he didn't say Mexico. I thought maybe I misheard that. And then you go to CNN and they're like, he said Mexico. And I thought, oh no.
I did not watch this last night. No cable news at my house, remember. Was it as bad as I'm reading today?
Yeah, it was actually
I didn't
worse
see it
because
either. No.
not only did he call the president of Mexico Sisi, he called the president of Turkey Viktor Orban.
But Sisi was right. I mean, he was talking about the right person. He got the Mexico-Egypt issue because
different borders. Different borders.
They're
both borders.
I mean, we're running out of time. If for him to say, you know, we're running out of time. I mean, who can step in? Because now we're going to be left with Kamala Harris, you know, as the natural nominee if Biden has to step down. But we've also got, you know, half a dozen other decent Democrats on the bench who are going to want a piece of the action. And I'm
just not so sure that he should have.
Story.
I mean, even though the special counsel, of course, released the results, and I think that maybe he went a little bit too far in his characterization of him being an older man, and maybe some jurors would think so. But I'm not sure that Biden should have immediately ran out and had this press conference. I think they should have slept on it. Obviously,
I agree with you.
He should have ran out and called a press conference.
But that would fall into the stereotype, Beverly, that somebody of his age needs a lot of sleep.
And I've got a question for the lawyers, maybe, and I've seen sometimes where federal prosecutors, they do a pro and con of why they should prosecute or why they shouldn't prosecute, the weaknesses in the case, and the question is, did he need to go that far and talk about the memory of his son and stuff like that? To me, I would have, if I were Biden last night, I would have said, I know when my son died. I just thought that was such a ridiculous.
He did say that.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Nobody ever. Yeah, he said nobody ever has to remind me of what that day was.
Yeah, I heard
that. You have to remember that also Trump recently said Nikki Haley was the head of security on January 6th, and he went on and didn't. And he kept saying, yeah, she was ahead. And when he talked about Tim Scott, he said Nikki Haley endorsed me after all that. So he's made a lot of fuck ups, but Trump looks stronger, much stronger than Biden.
Press love
physically.
Trump. There's no way around it. The TV news, the news loves Donald Trump, and they're not going to go after him. It's more fun to make fun of Biden because he's older. They live for the things that Donald Trump says. That's why I won't watch television news.
You know, I think that Saeed is probably the only Gen Xer in this group here. The rest of us are all boomers, I believe. And I have to say, you know, I have always resented the blanket condemnation of something that, you know, of our generation, right? You know, we're all individuals. There was no generation-wide meeting where we all decided we're going to loot the treasury, you know, and screw all the.
Meeting, Nance?
No, I missed that meeting, damn it. But, you know, this is the final. This I can get behind. This the boomers, the last boomer presidential election, and God damn it. Get these guys off the stage. You know, it's just, it's ridiculous. It's like both of them are not. I mean, I feel like Biden is qualified, but he cannot say anymore that he hasn't lost not just a step, but more like, you know, a lot of steps. And it's excruciating to watch this stuff.
Yeah, I would agree with you if the Republicans had a better candidate. And this is where it is. You know, both people would like a different choice, but having the former president is just not an option for any reason. Any reason. And then we should not stop there with the presidential. Let's clear out Senate and Congress too. You know,
I want to say I agree with Ann that who's watching that we ought to judge him on his performance, and I think he's really done a remarkable job. But and I hate to cite this guy because I'm no fan, but I think that I agree with Chris Christie when he said, you know who's going to win the next election? The first party to dump their senior candidate.
Absolutely.
And I think that may well be true. And if you look at, you know, there are 4 or 5 people on the bench. I think that any of them will win. That's how we.
Well, and that's right, because for Xers this is the last dance, but for boomers it's the last waltz.
Good one.
But unfortunately, appearances have a lot to do with, who gets elected. It's not all about appearances. I agree with Ann. I think he's had a remarkable. I just looked at my 401k balance, and I'm like, thank you, Biden. Things are going really
Presidents
well.
have very little to do with what
I
happens.
realize that, but they take credit for it anyway. So if they're going to take the credit, I'll give it to him. That's fine. But it's we learned this in 1960 when I was a mere toddler. But we learned this in 1960 with Nixon and Kennedy. It's appearances matter. So let's.
In the words of Tom Tomorrow, seeming is believing.
Yes.
But wait, but without, I understand what Ann's saying, and there's a lot of truth to what she's saying, but it just seems to me, and it applies to both of them. This is a country of 330 million people. And if you're telling me we can't find two candidates that are more adept and more able to carry on the public's business, there's something wrong with the country. Charles Grassley's 90, ran for real. It's insane to have people in that vintage running the country.
Look at what they have to go through. A lot of people are turned off to even remotely thinking about it.
Right.
It's a lot.
Well, we've seen in federal court, and you guys have seen, the lawyers have seen it. We've seen judges in their 90s who have stayed on the bench and been pretty. Abram Cohn was up until the end was still pretty sharp.
If you still got,
he was a bit of a problem.
Yeah, well, I think it's
a bit of a problem.
Yeah, well, he was 96, I think, when he finally stepped down or something like that.
If you've still got all your marbles up there, and law is one of those fields that I think you really do improve with age, until you start to slip. But this is, this is lawmaking. So I want to give him that, but I just think of all the young people. My daughter's generation, they all despise Biden, because they think he's soft on climate change, which is a really important issue to them. They're incandescent over the Middle East situation. And I just feel like they're either not going to vote, they're not going to vote for Trump, but they're not going to vote for Biden either. They're just going to either stay home or leave the top of the ticket blank. And that is not good.
Right. You do have a compromise candidate.
By the way, Fish and Bill, just so you know that I do keep an eye on you after the 55th minute in case there's a cognitive decline on the show as the show ages. So I've got you guys.
I want you to know. Wait, let me just say this: when we're talking about cognitive declines in these candidates, in our court, in our federal court, there are things put in place to try to avoid having the problems that we're talking about. Yeah. There are people who are in line to tell a judge if a judge gets to the point where he or she should not be sitting up there. There's a procedure. Abram was a good example of what happened there. So we do have something like that in other places. I'm sure in business there are procedures to get rid of people who they can't do the job anymore. This is really the same thing, it seems to me. But
we used to have a similar procedure in the government. Members of the leaders of the party would go, like they went to Nixon, and say, we can't back you anymore. You got to do something. It's just not going on. Right.
But Bill, the leader of, the so-called, at least administrative leader of the Republicans, Ronna McDaniel, looks like she's headed for the exits herself after the South Carolina primary.
I'd say one, maybe she can reclaim some of her spine for being in that position for so long. She was only making a little over $100,000 in her first year. Now she's making 400,000. Her and Trump do not get along. He wanted her to shut down the debates. She wouldn't do that. He's wanted her to declare him the guy before Nick, on top of Nikki Haley. They haven't gotten along for a long time. You notice she does not push for the election denying stuff anymore. In the very beginning, she was like, yes, we need to check on things, but she backed off of it, and he was just not going to be happy with her, and vice versa. So
I think when she leaves, Allan, she wants to go back and spend time with her middle name, because I think Trump made her drop Romney, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
Yes.
So speaking of the dysfunctionality of Washington, the House took a vote on the impeachment of Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, and we've got a video about that too, Alan.
Yes, we do. Let me find that here.
Although Democratic Congressman Al Green's entrance was actually more dramatic than Stone Cold's, as he was in the hospital recovering from emergency abdominal surgery last Friday, and Republicans therefore assumed he wouldn't be present for the vote, but he was. Here's how it went down, according to the New York Times. 3 House Republicans had already cast votes against impeaching Mayorkas, and based on attendance at the previous vote, the GOP could afford no more. Then, like a scene out of a political thriller, Representative Al Green, Democrat of Texas, appeared at the last moment to cast a surprise ballot from a wheelchair, wearing blue hospital clothing and tan socks. He voted no. Mr. Green's vote was decisive. It tied up the measure 215 to 215 and handed a stunning defeat to Speaker Mike Johnson. I was determined to cast the vote long before. I had no idea how close it was going to be. Mr. Green said in an interview on Tuesday night from his hospital bed where he had returned shortly after voting, I didn't come assuming that my vote was going to make a difference. I came because it was personal. Whoa! I came because it was personal. Delivered from a hospital bed after making a surprise last-minute appearance to cast the deciding vote. It's one hell of a line. I mean, who's going to play Al Green in the movie about this? Schwarzenegger? Hello, my name is Congressman Al Green from Texas. They came because it is personal.
That's a good one.
That is a good
Not
one.
wait for SNL this weekend.
That was Marjorie Taylor Greene was griping that the Democrats tricked us because they thought they had all the votes lined up, and then suddenly Congressman Greene shows up.
This is something that Nancy Pelosi would never have allowed to happen, ever, ever, ever. She would never have taken a bill to the floor if she didn't know she had the votes.
Yeah.
So by all means, let's.
These people are so inept.
It's like Jesus. Didn't Jesus call you, Mike Johnson, and tell you what happened?
I think in the House chamber it must have been like when Joan Collins came back on Dynasty and shocked everyone. There's a good boomer reference, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of borders, well, it reminds me in 36th District Court when the clients hadn't paid yet, and the judge would say, "Are we ready to proceed?" And the lawyer would say, "Your Honor, we're still waiting for Mr. Green," meaning else. Anyways, here's Congressman or Senator Langford on the whole border issue.
I had a popular commentator 4 weeks ago that I talked to that told me flat out, before they knew any of the contents of the bill, nothing was out at that point, that told me flat out, if you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you. Because I do not want you to solve this during the presidential election.
No surprise
as
there.
you know,
Sounds like he got a call from Trump.
Yeah.
And that bill is DOA in the House. I mean, it was a bipartisan bill. It was able to make it through the Senate. But what's next on the bill, do you think? Or on, I should say, on immigration reform. I don't know if there's going to be another
They can't
another
risk
bid.
another. They can't risk another humiliation like that. So, I mean, the idea of impeaching Mayorkas over this. I mean, this was impeachment isn't this in the law for high crimes and misdemeanors, not for we just don't like the way you're doing your job. I mean, that's ridiculous.
I think,
Well,
Bob, you're right. They can
okay.
still impeach
In response
Mayorkas.
to Bob's comment, yes, I do know that they can still bring up an impeachment proceeding. Yes, I do know that this is common amongst our ilk, that we ought to enforce the law and not politics when it comes to impeachment. There is no high crime or misdemeanor that Mr. Mayorkas has been accused of. He's been trying to do his job. He's been negotiating in good faith with both Republicans and Democrats to try and change what's going on at the border. Nobody in the Democratic Party or no one in the White House that I know of is saying we need to open these borders or that we should have open borders. This is a crisis, but it's a humanitarian crisis. It's a people crisis. And comments like, oh, we get to go back and impeach him aren't helpful.
No.
No.
I agree.
And in the impeachment proceeding, I mean, it has to go for conviction to the Senate. It'll never get a conviction in the
They don't
Senate,
care.
even for
They don't care. They'd rather spend their time having a trial and spend their time on this than solving problems. They don't have any interest in solving the problem.
I agree.
If you could impeach Mr. Dollar, if you could impeach people for not doing their job, we would impeach every member of Congress because they're not doing their job.
Right. No, this is just another thing. Like they're going to try on both sides probably, but more so on in the House all the way up to November, whatever they can to try to just, embarrass the Democrats. They're going to again continue to put, party over people, which is very unfortunate.
Party over country.
By the way, here's a headline. It says Jimmy Fallon says Tucker Carlson's interview with Putin clearly went well because Tucker is still alive.
For now.
It's true.
For now.
It's true. Or
my
not.
goodness.
He's not locked up. That's kind of true.
So the media has had a bit of a fascination with Detroit for quite a while, I suppose. But the Wall Street Journal had an op-ed a few days ago that declared or claimed that Dearborn is, quote, America's Jihad Capital. That has certainly elicited quite a bit of backlash. The Detroit Free Press had a fairly strong editorial itself to refute the besmirchment of Dearborn. Many politicians have also joined in, including President Biden, Governor Whitmer, and also Senate candidate and current Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin. Is there? I mean, I admit I haven't been through all aspects of Dearborn, but I've never really found it to be a bedlam of any kind of extremism. I mean, unless they put a little bit too much tahini in my hummus.
That garlic sauce that they throw on everything there is, boy, it's serious.
That battery acid. So I mean, what does it say then about the mainstreaming of the demonization of the city that has the largest concentration of Arabs outside the Middle East?
All right, and what it says, and this is something that Allan can back me up on. As long as I've been in journalism, people have always said the Wall Street Journal has an excellent reporting staff. They're a top-notch newspaper with an insane op-ed department or editorial page, essentially. That is where crazy goes to die. Now, I mean that was so beyond the pale that I thought it was remarkable, but it's also not all that surprising coming from the Walls. I mean, if you had told me which mainstream newspaper would run that headline, I would have said the Wall Street Journal immediately. Allan?
I agree with that. And I have a lot of friends at the Wall Street Journal have been there. Like the Detroit News, when we were working at the Detroit News, I mean, we had a reporting staff that was, I thought, a really solid staff that was majority liberal, and we had this really kind of right-wing editorial page. I think what it also speaks to is that, for them to allow something like that is particularly the headline is so outrageous that it's the people in New York who are allowing that, who don't have any friends other than their white Ivy League friends and don't understand. I mean, it's just so bigoted. It was such a horrible, I don't know.
I think that for you to say that about the Detroit News is, I mean, come on. Nolan Finley.
No, it's changed.
A raging liberal. So,
well, no. Look, when I was there, we had a very to the right. I wouldn't call Nolan exactly. In fact, I wrote something on Deadline today about one of their endorsements, but saying that. But anyways, when I was there, they had a guy formerly of the Wall Street Journal who was running our editorial page. So it was extremely, I can tell you one time when we were in East Lansing, we were in the Lansing Bureau, and a bunch of us wearing our trench coats and stuff, and we went to Lizards in this basement bar, a dive bar, and when we walked in, everyone was silent. They thought like, oh no, the feds are here. And we were walking out, and some guy yells to us, he goes, hey, you guys with the FBI? And we said, no, we're with the Detroit News. We're in the Lansing Bureau. And he said, oh, Detroit News, cool. Anti-union, pro-Reagan. We're like,
but isn't that the problem with again the television news, which is I can go on and on about it, but these are people that really never go out of their little bubble. They're all in New York and they're all in Washington and the Wall Street Journal, and it's an easy racist trope.
Right.
To bitch about Dearborn. It's a real easy one, and everyone's afraid of that. And I mean, you tell people that you've got, like I am a white blonde woman, and I go to Dearborn to eat, and people are like, it's like.
Well,
no.
do you remember a few years ago when there was a much more down market right wing? I think it was like Breitbart or the Gateway Pundit or one of those, one of those like bottom feeding news sites that had like this whole anti-Dearborn thing where they're talking about the Detroit police won't even patrol there. It's like, well, yeah, because it's a different city, and they talk about how the, there's, I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, anybody who's gone to Dearborn knows it's ridiculous. But
no, Dearborn is really great. I mean, beyond the people, the food, but again, me as a minority, we're used to this. Detroiters, I still live in Detroit, but all the years, how the propaganda across the nation, even as Detroit, tries to, turn around, there's still, I think this is going to be blamed Detroit, and you're looking at the population of minority. So you look at these, some of the racist, writers or some of the national outlets that will never, I think, let Detroit grow. So when I hear that and read that about Dearborn, it was very shocking because it went too far, but it did not surprise me, having been a lifetime Detroiter and what we've been called for many, many years.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the East Coast is so elite that they think Dearborn is in the Central Time Zone. I mean, this is why when you're at Metro Airport, they make that announcement in 3 languages that Detroit's in the Eastern Time Zone. I thought it was for foreign travelers. I think it's actually for New Yorkers, so that they know where it is. So speaking of flights, we've got a Super Bowl coming up this Sunday, but this isn't really about that. This actually has to do with Taylor Swift, though, who is, as for those of you who don't know, is dating Kansas City Chief tight end Travis Kelce.
Somebody doesn't know that? Wow.
I mean, we have no one who lives.
I have been living under a rock.
I'm saying that in case my dad's listening. So, Dad, that one's for you. But apparently, Swifty's a little bit upset at a student who apparently is tracking her flights, a la Elon Musk, and she's now threatening a lawsuit against him for, from what I understand, just simply using information that's available on the internet to go ahead and track the Swift jet. So from a legal standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, do you think that this is going to be a matter of diminishing returns, that she's seemingly stretching a bit too far? Yes.
Didn't Elon Musk already threaten that guy? It's the same kid, I believe. Yeah, and it's all he does is he finds the tail numbers for their private jets, and then this is all
which
you said, available on the internet. It's all available on the internet, and then they, he's traveling from here to here, and as a journalist, sometimes that information is incredibly important. So I am not in favor of shutting it down. At the same time, we were talking about Taylor Swift last week, and, she has become the target of some MAGA heads, some MAGA maroons. And, I would worry about, it's not like you can buy a surface to air missile, in any gun store, although I'm sure the NRA would love that. I don't blame her for not wanting people to know where her plane is.
Right.
Nancy, pea shooters and slingshots, they work well.
No, she's got to be really tired of it. She's got people stalking her house every day. She has to go everywhere with bodyguards. And we said this last week. She says that she carries a wound kit in her purse,
right?
In case she gets shot or one of her people gets shot. This is a crazy, fucked up situation where people think just because you're famous that they can have you.
They have a right to know everything about you, including your whereabouts, right?
And be in your house, and then be your boyfriend. I wouldn't have You know, and I think she's remarkably nice and kind for someone that lives like that all the time.
Fame can suck at that level.
Yes, yes. And I feel sorry for her too. I mean, you know, when you're having to have that much fame and going through all of that, at the same time, I also feel bad for the citizens also who have, you know, domestic violence cases and PPO orders and individuals too. They have no protection. They don't even have the funding to support themselves.
Right. And think about all the games you've been to, and not once has a national camera focused on you in the stands. That sucks.
It would be amazing if they found me in the stands. But
yeah, but Alan, when I go to a game, I'm kind of like George Costanza digging into that hot fudge sundae. So you know, it's not very pretty.
Right.
So
hey, Saeed, we have one more entertaining little video. It's
Let's
a quickie.
go for it.
In a Nevada primary where Donald Trump was not on the ballot, the winner was literally nobody.
It was a disappointing night in Nevada for Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley. The former South Carolina governor finished behind none of these candidates. That was the choice. None of these candidates in the presidential primary, in which Trump didn't even bother to participate.
I don't know what the opposite of momentum is, but I know Haley's got it. Even worse, she actually came in third behind none of these candidates, and no, seriously, not you, Nikki.
Who would have thought that in 2024 we would be giving props to Clint Eastwood and his empty chair, saying, you know, maybe he was onto something back in 2012.
They do have a caucus. They do have a caucus coming up in Nevada, which Trump is.
It was last night, wasn't it?
It was last night.
Was it last night?
And
Okay.
Yeah, and he swept it. I think he swept all but one delegate.
Right.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah. So why don't we take a commercial now?
Thanks, Charles, for letting me use your gardening supplies. I'll make sure I put it back in the garage. Man, tending to that lawn is a lot of work.
Tell you the truth, Jim, I'm more concerned about keeping this house.
What's going on?
Well, you know, Sarah lost her job 2 months ago, right?
Yeah.
Since we lost that income, the bills have been piling up, and we're so far behind. I don't want to lose the house because of back taxes. I don't know what to do.
I understand. The same thing happened to my sister and her husband when he lost his job. Do you know that the Wayne County Treasurer has plans and programs to help people stay in their homes?
No, I didn't. Tell me about it.
Yeah, go to www.treasure.waynecounty.com and see if you qualify.
What's that site again?
www.treasure.waynecounty.com.
Got it.
And now,
downtown Detroit, Robert Wells, Schmuck of the Week.
okay, there's a plethora of schmucks this week, I am sure. So Beverly, you've got the center square. We'll go with you.
I'm just gonna go ahead and just say Tucker Carlson. I mean, how low can you go? He's just mine. It was a lot of smokes this week, but he takes the cake for me. Tucker Carlson is my smuck of the week. Hands down.
From Nancy and Bill's reaction, if you need a backup schmuck, I've got a couple. So you look exasperated. You look exasperated. Okay. Fish.
Well, mine was fairly simple. We put Senator Langford on there, and he said what he said. My schmuck of the week is some guy by the name of Jesse Kelly, who identified himself as he's a MAGA radio host, whatever that means, and he identified himself as being the guy who absolutely did this to Senator Langford. And what did he call him? Of course, a eunuch. Senator Langford, the eunuch that he is, deserved it from me. I, Jesse Kelly, am the guy who threatened to ruin his life, his career, whatever else it is. And for that, Mr. Jesse Kelly, you are my schmuck of the week.
Oh, that's a good one. Wow. Okay. Barb.
Because I don't like to go far from Michigan Republicans. Representative Josh Scrivener of Oxford.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is because you can't lose any votes by these people by being racist. Is pushing the great replacement theory again. Racist ideological belief that there's a coordinated global effort to diminish the influence of white people. They can't get stupider or meaner, I tell you.
He's also the guy who, when Gretchen Whitmer was entering the was it the Senate or wherever they give the State of the State address, handed her a Bible. And, like, you know, she's shaking hands, going down the aisle, and he hands her a Bible because,
well, we should.
You know, it's not like people in Oxford have anything else to think about.
Right.
We should rest assured that one day you can tell him we're going to have a white governor, a white attorney general, and we're going to have a white secretary of state. So
yeah,
have faith,
and say that with the word inshallah.
Yeah,
inshallah.
Yeah.
And see how he takes it.
Keeping hope alive.
Bill.
Well, I tell you, I wanted Tucker Carlson. He ought to burn in hell for doing this interview with Putin. Not only the interview with Putin, but his setup of the interview. No one has allowed this poor man to tell his good story. And it was all bullshit, but he would have been mine. But I'll give it to the RNC, including Ronna McDaniel's Romney, for giving in to Trump. If the RNC had any sense or any gonads, they would not give in to Trump. She wouldn't resign, and there'd be some guardrails up against this fascist, maniacal maniac, but there aren't. Thank you.
All right, Nancy.
Well, I usually almost always have two schmucks on my list, but for some reason this week I only had Tucker Carlson, and I'm going to give it to him. I'm going to pile on to the. I'm going to give him a second crown of Schmuck of the Week for that stupid expression on his face. Why did they even do like reaction shots when he's doing an interview? Because he always looks the same. He's like, he's kind of like a dog that's been, you know, like you do the fake out when you're going to throw the stick, but then you don't, you know, that's what he looks like.
The schmuck.
And yes, and Putin basically from the jump apparently had him just, I mean, he just walked all over him. He opened the interview with something like a 30-minute discussion of Russian history. The Carlson, skilled interrogator that he is, was unable to interrupt. So there you go.
Alan.
I am going to say Marjorie Taylor Greene for trying to push through the Mayorkas impeachment and then whining that the Democrats fooled us and they were hiding somebody, and suddenly Congressman Greene showed up, and she was so mad how that they fooled us. We thought Congressman Greene would never show up.
Oh, man.
How dare people try to do their job?
Okay, I'm gonna, Nancy, just because we can't just have piling on. I mean, I technically Beverly said Tucker Carlson and you said Tucker Carlson's face. So I mean, I guess we could maybe just make a distinction. But so my first one is Missouri Republican candidate for Secretary of State, 24-year-old Valentina Gomez, who posted a video in which she uses a flamethrower to light fire to books on the social media platform X a couple days ago by saying, quote, "When I'm Secretary of State, I will burn all the books that are grooming, indoctrinating, and sexualizing our children. MAGA, American first. America first." Luckily, it seems that there was a very courageous librarian who was secreting copies of the Bible and Mad Magazine out to preserve them, because those, of course, are used for grooming, indoctrinizing, and sexualizing. But yes, I mean, she was going after a pile of LGBTQ themed books. But my other schmuck, sort of your proxy schmuck, Nancy, is music mogul Jay-Z, or as we say in England, Jay-Z, who at the Grammys brought up his 12-year-old prop daughter, Blue Ivy, while he was receiving the Dr. Dre Global Impact Award, and then started to grouse against said Grammys for mistreating his wife, Beyonce, who was sitting in the audience looking like albino Cher with a long blonde wig and a cowboy hat, that despite the fact that she holds the record for the most Grammys ever of 32, she hasn't won for Album of the Year, which from what I understand usually goes to the producers anyway. And she requires so many writers, lyricists, and producers that actually more are on her album than the number of people who've walked on the moon ever. So apart from the fact of having a very crowded stage, if she ever did win one, Jay-Z decided to take a page out of Kanye and throw shade at anybody who would dare stand in the way of the sense of entitlement that he and she, and apparently now also their daughter, has regarding Album of the Year. So Jay-Z and Valentina Gomez. In
Good
fact,
for you.
Valentina, if you want to take a flamethrower to some Beyonce albums, not complaining. Both my schmucks.
Full disclosure, I am a member of the Beehive.
And you know what? I'm not scared. I'll give you my address.
I mean, the Grammys were always like they were like the Oscars used to be. It was always the safe, the John Denver would win before the MC5 would win anything. But, this is, it just, I don't understand this groveling for a stupid trophy. I mean, you can go to the party and it's like, who gives a shit if you win a Grammy? So anyway.
We were having this discussion on email about lettering in sports and everything. And, those participation trophies, they still mean something to me. So, don't throw shade. Yeah,
Okay.
Don't throw shade for us bench warmers. Thank you very much. Except, of course, I did. Of course, I did play first position for chess. So, ha.
There you go. Grammys were much better this year than I had any expectation for it to be. Opening up with Tracy Chapman and Luke Combs was one of the most beautiful moments.
Yeah.
That I mean, it was just like shocking how good that was, and the expression on Luke Combs' face while this beautiful woman was singing the song that he just got. I mean, it was really lovely. And I have to say, I don't totally disagree with Jay-Z. I
totally.
I have to say, I think that, and I don't like. That's not my music, right? That's not my music. So the only reason I know any of either Taylor Swift or Beyonce's songs at all is because I worked in a mall for a while.
So I even think that even if we don't,
millions of dollars that those two have shaken out of American music fans enough. Now they have to have a stupid statue to go on top of it. It's like,
but I think
it's not even a statue.
If you took out the Beyonce and you looked at others giving to what he said, I think you see a little validity in it. But overall, my view is whether it's the Oscars, Grammy, or Golden Globes, I think this is excellent marketing. What they do, they're going to have a controversial topic of some kind, and that keeps them thriving every year. That's a good marketing tool.
I guess.
Hey, by the way, Fish, I gotta say, even you would have enjoyed the Grammys because Joni Mitchell performed. She hadn't performed ever on the Grammys, and she just amazing.
Well, she was great.
Stunning.
She was great.
Yeah.
She was
What did she sing? Did she sing the Circle Game?
She sang
both sides now.
She's so old and sick now. She has to sit down. She holds her cane. I mean, it's. I thought it was a moving performance because that's a song essentially about being older, but I also thought I don't think I ever want to see her wheeled out onto a stage to do this again. But who knows?
You know, the ticket for Hollywood Bowl are over at this point something like $3,000. That dynamic Ticketmaster stuff. So
a friend of mine got on the pre-sale for that show, and the cheapest ticket is $600 and some dollars.
Wow.
Yeah. I saw Joni Mitchell at Pine Knob in 1975. I'm done. I'm good.
Yeah. She lived in Detroit, I think, in the Cass corridor for a little while.
She did. She lived in the
All right,
corridor.
let's let Steve get back to billing by the hour. So
Steve has never sent a bill by the hour. So what
I'm surprised Steve's still with us.
Thank you all for another great show. Thank you for joining us as an audience. Thank you, of course, to the esteemed panelists. Thank you, Beverly Watts. Thank you, Barb Ingalls. Thank you, Bill Seikaly. Thank you, Steve Fishman. Thank you, Nancy Derringer. And with the last word always, Allan Lengel.
Drive home safely.